My name is. I am the founder of the Charlotte Optimist, a new nonprofit media outlet here in Charlotte. I have the pleasure today to sit with Dr. Philip Otienoburu. For the purposes of the discussion, we're going to call him Dr. O. But as you know, he's the Senior Vice President of Community Development and placement for Center City Partners, which is like a lot of placemaking stuff that you do. And then we have Adam Rhew over here, who I've known for a very long time, and actually had the pleasure of hiring. Now he could hire me. He is CEO everything at SouthPark Partners, for a new or relatively community organization in SouthPark. Adam worked at Center City Partners though for a while, which is where I'm going to start. Adam, how is life in SouthPark different from life at Center City Partners?
Well, you know, I think obviously the scale of the place is different. And what I always tell people is our organizations, and we can talk a little bit about how we're structured and what our organizations do in a second, but we have the same tools in our toolboxes. We use them differently because the places are different. SouthPark is obviously much more suburban. It's on this journey from becoming a very traditionally suburban place to something that is more urban, more mixed use, more dense. It's never going to be a full South End or a full Uptown, but it's trending more in that direction than the other direction. And so, you know, there are things that we're thinking about that are, we face similar challenges. They show up differently because the context of the built environment is different. And the role they play in the regional economy is a little bit different. And so those things require us to use different tools or maybe use the tools in different ways. But we're still thinking about how do we drive vibrancy, how do we create a sense of place to create emotional connectivity, and to do all of that so that those places are thriving and fuel quality of life and fuel job growth and investment, and a strong place for people to live, work, and play.
I did want to mention, because we didn't introduce everybody, Keith Stanley can't be here today. He had a family matter come up this week, but we had a wonderful conversation about this, like an hour-long conversation talking about it. And what I found fascinating was that you're talking about something as big as sustainability. But then we started talking about it, like how it works in little pockets of Charlotte. And then it's like, oh, this is wonderful, because we're not talking about it at like the national political level or anything like that. We're talking about it at intersection by intersection level, which is really fun. You were helping us sort of bring all of that together. You know, you mentioned even in that conversation, it's like these neighborhood groups can help us keep our eye on the ball and not be as distracted by changes in the national political landscape or even the statewide political landscape. Talk about that just for a little bit. What, for folks who want to be involved in efforts to create a more sustainable living environment, how important is it to do it at that intersection by intersection level versus thinking about, you know, getting wrapped up in all of the issues nationwide?
Thank you. And thank you all for being here. Again, I'd like to acknowledge our colleague here, Keith Stanley, who lost his mom this week. So we definitely send our thoughts and love to his family. But yeah, coming back to the conversation. By the way, Charlotte Center City Partners, like South End Community Partners or SouthPark. Yeah, we do it all the time. We do it all the time. Yes. So we manage 4 municipal service districts. 3 of those are actually in Uptown, and then MSD4 is South End. So we call that entire area Center City for us. Okay, so like an extension of Uptown. But anyway, back to your question, Michael. I'd say that we have been very lucky to have a very connected and engaged community, both in Uptown and South End. And the way that plays out is, we have a very passionate constituency, if you will, of residents, businesses that care about the kinds of things that we all care about. They care about the built environment. They care about transportation and mobility. They care about, green spaces that can be enjoyed by all. And we partner with them to ensure that we can not only help to oversee development that comes into these places, but then partner with them to actually envision for the future what would our joint aspirations are. So we have worked with a number of organizations in the area, as basic as food security. I see Sam here with the South End Farmers Market, but then we are talking about organizations that take care of cleaning up the rail trail at South End, or that are engaged in advocating for smart transit or transportation. I see Meg here with Sustained Shout. So bringing all these groups together and having a joint aspirational goal actually helps to move them, regardless of what's happening on the national stage.
I think so. If you think about all three of our organizations, including Keith's, our mission, we're all nonprofits, and we're each missioned with the care of this particular area. So for us, it's a 1 square mile district in the commercial heart of SouthPark. And you've heard from Bill of the Center City Partners boundaries. University City Partners manages 10 square miles. We basically have a partnership with the city to steward those places on the city's behalf and in partnership with the city. And so we get some supplemental tax revenue that we use to, do our annual work that supports our annual program of work, but it's all within that defined geography. And so for us, it's really helpful to narrow the aperture and think. All I'm thinking about is this 1 square mile. Now, clearly, we want to think about how that square mile fits into the bigger context. So we're not doing it in a vacuum, but I'm thinking about how many trees will get taken out when this one sidewalk project is done, and how many trees will get put back on that one street. So for us, it really helps us to focus in on the things, the levers that we can control, the things that are within that one little pocket of Charlotte. And if we can be successful in making that place vibrant in all the ways that we think about vibrancy, we think that trickles up, if you will, to the city level, the regional level, state, and so on. So that's how our piece of the puzzle fits into the bigger context, but we're thinking about it truly at that street corner level.
You mentioned all these partnerships, and I think that's interesting. Is people walk along the rail trail and you might see a couple on the ground and say, well, why didn't they pick that up? There's a lot of different days that are involved in doing that, right? How many organizations are you guys part of?
Oh my God. We partner with quite a few organizations. I'd say upward of 15 organizations that represent different parts of Center City. So the organizations that are specific to Uptown, and there are others that are very specific to South End. But then we also have community-wide organizations that, like I mentioned, as Sustained Charlotte, which is Envision Charlotte as well, that was cultivated and incubated at Center City Partners, but now works across the county. So there's a lot of organizations out there doing really meaningful work that not only connects the different entities, but tasked with stewarding our municipal service districts, but then have broader reach in the county.
We just want to build one thing on that. All three organizations have the name partners, the word partners in their name, and that's intentional. None of us have any authority, right? We have influence to certain degrees, but we can't compel anybody to do anything. And so everything we are able to achieve is through partnerships. And inherently, in order to be successful, whether it's getting trash picked up or building, huge public-private partnerships, it inherently has to be getting lots of people to the table, creating some sort of shared vision for what we want to do together, and then holding hands to get from point A to point B and to do that together. And that all requires trust and relationships and all the things that you need to, work together collaboratively to achieve a desired outcome versus, I think sometimes we hear, well-meaning people say, you should just, and trust me, if you should just, I would love to be able to, you should just lots of things, but very frequently, we don't have the authority to do that. And so it's got to, how do we get a bunch of people around the table to work together toward that shared vision?
Yeah, and it's important to highlight as well the role of local government. We all work with the city and the county at some level, and we've been very, very fortunate to have a city and county that has a shared vision of what our area should look like. So I think a lot of the work that we have done has actually been in very, very close partnership with both the city and local government and county government.
What's in the area of sustainability, since that's where we are in the conference, what individual projects have each of your organizations introduced here in the past couple of years that fall under the umbrella of sustainability? And I know Adam has a different perspective on this because he says that when I think of sustainability, we're all in the quality of life business, so sustainability is part of quality of life business is sort of on the same plane as sustainability in the world, but specifically when it comes to sort of sustainable programs. What have you guys introduced in the last couple of years?
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at South End, for instance, the district, this is a district that was created with transit-oriented development at its core. One, you have the blue line that goes right across it. You see, when I moved to Charlotte in 2011, South End was nothing close to what it is now. And as the blue line came in, you now begin to see all of the infrastructure that goes in, all these assets coming into the space. And one, it has become a very, very vibrant community. I mean, it stands out quite a bit just based on that investment, and then, when it comes to, say, safe pedestrian streets, when it comes to the cycle lane, for instance, in Uptown, you see that connector between 5th and 6th that connects Arwin Creek to the west side, and then little Stewart Creek on the east side. That connects it to, maybe close to 40 miles of Greenway on that side. So those are very, very impactful investments that we've seen in a very short time. And they help to build out what we think of as a sustainable district.
Who makes those investments?
So it's the city, by the way, one thing that's coming online is the PEDS Bridge, the pedestrian bridge connecting Uptown to South End. And that is actually a public-private investment. A US bank came in and supported part of the construction. The city came in at probably $16 million for that. And it's going to be a game changer, not only for pedestrian safety, but then allowing people to move back and forth between uptown and South End.
So for us, we have a couple of different projects, and I'll get to specifics in a minute, but just to kind of pull up for a minute and frame it, we published last year our 10-year vision plan for SouthPark. That was an effort that we led that was rooted in the community, and basically what we said to our stakeholders was, what should SouthPark be in a decade? What do we want it collectively to be in a decade? And then what are the projects and programs and the things that we need to do to get there, to achieve that vision over the course of the next decade? And sustainability was in some ways at the core of that vision. The vision plan had three kind of big buckets. One was around creating better access to public space, so parks, plazas, open space. The second bucket was all around pedestrian and bicycle connectivity, both inside SouthPark and then between the commercial core of SouthPark and the rest of the community. So SouthPark to the Greenway system, SouthPark to the adjacent residential neighborhoods. And then the third bucket was all about mobility innovation. So thinking differently about how we move around SouthPark other than using a single occupancy vehicle. And so all of those buckets had a sustainable ethos to them. And within kind of each of those verticals, we've got a series of projects and programs that we identified, very specific, actionable things that we could work, again, together with our partners to go implement over the course of the 10 years. So I'll give you a couple of examples. One, you may have heard of our microtransit program, the SouthPark Skipper. We launched that in mid-November. It's basically a free ride service inside our 1 square mile district using a fleet of all electric vehicles. The idea is to facilitate a park once environment. What we see happen a lot, again, within our little 1 square mile universe, is people making a lot of short trips in their car, right? You leave the office, you go pick up something from the drugstore, you come back. You leave the office, you go to a lunch meeting, you come back. You leave the office, you go to the dry cleaner, you come back. Maybe you hit the grocery store, right? People are making these intra-district trips that are really short. And what we said is, how can we facilitate somebody to come in, whether it's a worker, a resident, our seniors who live in our senior centers that are inside the district? How do we help them park one time and then use electric vehicles to move around? We've served about 32,000 passengers, I think, in the last 6 months, maybe not quite that, but we're serving about 4,000 to 5,000 passengers a month. And what we've seen is that people are really embracing this idea of parking once, using our service to get around. Obviously, the benefit for the businesses is that it captures people, right? It keeps them in SouthPark longer, which from an economic standpoint is good. But over time, what we're hoping to see is obviously a transition from single occupancy gas-powered vehicle trips to either shared pooled electric vehicle trips or even single occupancy electric trips. If I'm going to 3 meetings across a day, I would much rather ride in the Skipper and make those electric vehicle trips than use my gas-powered car to zip back and forth from my office to 3 or 4 places around SouthPark. So that's one. The other one I'll mention just really quickly is a really intentional effort around preserving, enhancing, and adding green space in SouthPark. Within the boundaries of our district, there are 100 acres of surface parking lots, just surface, not structured, 100 acres. It's a really suburban model. Our hope is that over time, we start to convert some of those 100 acres to things that are higher and better uses, like parks, little thumbprints of green space, this constellation, if you will, of green spaces. And so one of the projects we're working on right now is a $21 million public-private partnership to enhance Symphony Park, which is and should be the kind of signature urban park in SouthPark. We've got a lot of work to do to really raise the bar, both from a design and access standpoint, but then also a programming and use standpoint. So those projects are some of the things that we're working on. And again, these are in the scheme of the universe and the scheme of the national context. They're smaller moves, but highly impactful with people who live, work, visit, spend time in the place that we steward.
Yeah, so yeah, just add to that, the role of private investment as well, private capital in developing these areas. So we have, of course, the 2040 vision plan. We have a UDO as well, and we have a ton of people moving to Charlotte. How do you house them, for instance? You now begin to see private capital going into developing, densified housing, for instance, in both uptown and South End. I'm sure in SouthPark and the university area, which is very important because it reduces the number of vehicles that are needed, especially for people who actually work in these areas around the commercial core of the city. But then I think having that in mind and seeing, that investment come in line actually helps to create a big impact on sustainability and sustainability goals. You talked about green spaces, in Uptown, we have the Mermaid, which is 5.4 acres, and then Bosworth Park, which is right out here. That's 4 acres of land, green space that we use and enjoy for different events. You can see how people engage with that green space. Reducing heat impacts, for instance, is extremely important when it comes to living in a concrete jungle like this. So, yeah.
On the private sector piece, I think it's so important, and a good example of the role that our organizations can play is, again, to try to get the partners at the table and work together to influence our private businesses, our private investors, our private landowners to support these goals. So it's not all government driven. We had a project in SouthPark that went through a rezoning late last year, early this year, I can't remember, where a developer was taking an old 80s era office building and rethinking what they wanted to do on the site. And we said, the SouthPark Vision Plan explicitly called out your site as a place where we should identify and capture green space. And so in order for us to be supportive of your project, we got to see a site plan that includes an inclusion of green space. They added a half-acre pocket park to their plan. That's a place that currently is a whole bunch of asphalt and is now going to have a half-acre of grass and green space. It's going to be active and vibrant and beautiful and not a heat island. But it was the developer that ultimately is going to spend the money and made the commitment to do that. And our role was just to advocate for it and to use the plan that the community gave us. Like, look, these are our values, these are our aspirations. And so our job is to then advocate for those things with the private sector and for them to do the right thing.
Yeah, we have a similar example with Queensbridge, which is the high, I think it's 42-story tower that's going to be connecting Uptown and South End as well, where they're actually going to create a pocket park as well, or have about 1 acre just for green space, and that's going to be right in the community South End.
Is that available to the public or just people who use?
Oh, no, I mean, it'll be open to the public for sure. Yeah.
And then we were talking to Keith, and these issues are different up in University City. I think, was it just this week that Vanguard did the ribbon cutting out there too? So they moved into the major development that was sent to me. Keith had a ton of corporations are looking at it as far as relocation goes too. University City has a whole nother set of issues. He talked a lot about land use and trying to ensure that private developers are thinking about that sort of as you guys were talking about. And obviously they are now sort of where South End was many years ago when the rail went through there. Like the rail goes up to University City, 2017 or 18 or whatever was when it opened. And so you think the rail went through South End in 2007. So okay, 10 years difference. What did University City see?
Oh, I can tell you what they're going to see. I mean, they're going to see an explosion because people are still moving to Charlotte. I think 117 people a day moving to Charlotte, and housing is extremely important. Not only are the office assets important that draw these people in, but then they have to live somewhere. And most people make choices to live close to where they work to reduce their commute. Who wants to spend an hour in traffic like I do from time to time, just getting to the office. So yeah, I think it's going to be the same story.
Keith has some stat, and I'm not going to get it right, but he and I have the privilege of being on panels together, and I've heard him say this. I think it's somewhere between 15 and 20% of the building permits being issued in Mecklenburg County right now are being issued in University City. It's some huge number. And so it just shows you the proportion of growth that's happening, in that submarket.
How far in your mind is SouthPark from University City? And how far in actuality?
Distance?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so I'm a native Charlottean. I learned to drive here, and my frame of reference for how far apart things are is what they were when I learned to drive in the early 2000s. And so like my sense of distance and time is like 20 years warped. It's really interesting. Keith and I have two very different places. The district that University City Partners manages is 10 square miles. Ours is 1. So fundamentally, just like the challenges that our organizations face are of different scale, but like we often run into variations of the same issues. So like land use and some of the things that Keith is thinking about, they show up differently in University City, but they're still challenges. It's a very, they now have the blue line, but still a very car-centric place. SouthPark is extraordinarily car-centric. And so microtransit is of interest to both of us. And while the places are, obviously quite distinct, we're wrestling with some of the same challenges. They've got an amazing greenway network that they have access to that we're learning from. How do we connect our commercial and residential developments better to the greenway system?
It's so psychological. When I first moved to Charlotte, had a job offer, had to get a job within 3 days, or I had to get an apartment within like 3 days. So I found the cheapest place I could find, it was near the hair swap. And I spent my entire first year sitting at the intersection of Fairview and Sharon. And I said in my brain, I will never live south of Fairview because I can't take the city. It was like 30 minutes to go this.
Where did you move from?
I moved from Greensboro.
Oh, okay.
Traffic was not a thing. So it's a psychological.
Totally.
Which is why I want to get to the next question. We talked a little bit about the big mobility plan. That was like where the natural evolution of the conversation went, was to the transportation plan, and which it looks like the legislature will take up probably. I joke, they'll probably take it up right as the session is about to end, and they'll just make like this generational decision in a matter of hours. But it was our natural evolution, and I kind of want to know, why does somebody in Center City care about the big transportation? And why would somebody in SouthPark care? There's no train coming to SouthPark, and trust me, I know we have the former mayor here, and I know she heard that a bunch. We're not getting the train, so like, why?
I mean,
why are people?
As you read, it's going to make a generational impact. I drive, to the south of Charlotte where I live because I have no other choice. I don't have the same choices as someone who would be, along the rail line or with access to bus transportation or easy access. It's that reliability factor, it's that convenience that would be such a game changer. If people had the choice, I just attended the previous panel that discussed this in depth, but if people have the choice to have convenient transportation system that allows them to actually get to places they want to go conveniently, of course, safely, they would probably result in selecting transit options that enable that. I don't have that flexibility. I wish I did, but I think this plan will actually enable us to have much more access to the system. So that's why, I think we as an organization support it. I, as an individual who would be a customer, would support it for sure.
So I have sort of 3 points that I would make on this. First, at the hyper-local SouthPark level, why does somebody in SouthPark care? We have a handful of projects that would benefit from this pool of resources. Sidewalk projects. One of the projects that we're really excited about is the SouthPark Loop. It's a 3-mile urban trail. I always tell people, imagine a rail trail, but a circle and with no train tracks. And like, that's the vision for the loop. And that project is probably, it's about 8% complete today. We've got another, let's call it 12% that's in either active construction or planning. But it's probably a $40 million project that is completely unfunded. And there is a huge desire from the community to build the loop, which makes SouthPark easier, safer, and more pleasurable to walk around and better connect SouthPark to the Greenway system. And the only way the loop is going to get done in time for me to walk on it with all of my existing parts and no artificial joints is if we get some sort of generational investment to be able to deliver it quickly. And so, again, at the hyper-local level, there are things that our community gets, right, that are really day-to-day life changers. Two, I think we keep calling it a generational investment, and part of why it's a generational investment is because it enables us as a community to deliver projects at scale and at speed. One of the things that we have struggled with as a community, and this is not unique to Charlotte, but it's something that we feel acutely, is these big infrastructure projects take too long to deliver, and largely because we have to parse out the funding in ways where we can tap into, okay, well, we've got this pool of bond funding, so let's do a little bit of sidewalks, and let's do all the sidewalks we can do with these bond dollars, and then we got to wait until we get the coffers filled back up. The amount of resources that we're able to pour into mobility projects, it enables us as a community to accelerate things and hopefully deliver them much faster. That we've got to commit to that as a community and expect that of our public sector. But the speed at which we can bring projects to market, I think, is important. And then 3, philosophically, even if SouthPark didn't get a thing out of this referendum, I think as a Charlottean, as a person who lives here, I would still care tremendously about it, because we've got to think cohesively about how our region chooses to grow and evolve over the next 50 years. And that, to me, again, this is my personal opinion, but it requires us to take a less self-interested mindset and to think about the collective good. And the collective good is that if we can move people around our community in a more efficient, more sustainable, more strategic way than we're doing today, Charlotte wins. The region wins, and if we miss the opportunity to do that, it could be several generations before we have the opportunity to do that again. So I just think there is this civic good that is inherent in big opportunities like this. And are they perfect? No, but we shouldn't miss the opportunity to do something special. That's
yeah. I mean, I completely agree, and I'll just give you a personal story of mine. My wife moved here from Sweden. She's from Sweden, and she had never, and their family never had a car growing up. She had never learned how to drive, and I lived in Matthews at the time, and it was extremely cumbersome for her to get to a bus to go anywhere. And here we are, new parents, having to pack up a stroller and put it in the bus, and I mean it was such an inconvenience. And she ended up, within a couple of years, succumbing to what we have all succumbed to, which is getting into a car and depending on that for your transportation. I think for a city our size, it is, I'd say it's an embarrassment that we should still be there. And I think that we need to make these investments to make sure that not only are we well connected, but then people who would actually not have the ability to connect to jobs and such places, who tend to be Black and brown in a lot of communities, actually have that access. And that's what expanding the network will actually do. It's a discussion around equity when it comes to transportation. And I think building that into a city like Charlotte is extremely important.
We between us, not you mentioned, I think we have 7 boys between us. All of us.
Yeah.
Is it possible to be a family? Well, relatively easy.
It's not easy. I'll tell you that it's not easy. All right, so we moved from Matthews even further south, and that was if my wife had come in now, where it would be absolutely impossible, or extremely costly, just to get around, because the closest bus is, let me see, it's about 6 miles from where we live. How do you survive that case if you have to haul around 2 boys, 2 energetic boys, and get them to places where you'd like to be? It's very, very important, and it's very practical. I don't know how people do it, but there are people who that's their reality. They have to deal with that on a day-to-day basis and make choices about taking your kid to the doctor for an appointment or missing a day of work. That is real.
Yeah, I mean, it's, to me, you asked the question, is it possible? And I think, yes, if either one, you have the privilege and the financial resources to elect to do that. And so could our family of 5 decide that we want to make a lifestyle choice and live somewhere that's adjacent to the blue line? And I mean, like, yes, we could probably figure out a way to do that. It would be a pretty dramatic lifestyle change for us. My wife and I are 2 people who grew up in Charlotte, and like I'm, pretty accustomed to loading everybody up in the car and going to do the things that today I took my boys to Lowe's and like load everybody in the SUV, drove to Lowe's, got the things we need. Drive back. Like, could I imagine doing that without a car? I think so, but like it'd be pretty dramatic for me. And then obviously the other category is people who are dependent on that situation, who don't have the choice and live where they are able to live and their life is influenced by the structure of the transit network that is what's going on. So there are people that do that, and it's hard. I mean, even we hear stories of seniors in the SouthPark area who want to use public transportation, who have to rely on public transportation to get from SouthPark to a doctor's appointment somewhere else in the community, and it's an hours-long journey to do that. And I think about, I don't know about your experience, but our family is rarely on time for anything we attend. To try to get 3 boys like
I thought it was just
collected and out the door, right? And so like trying to then back time out, okay, we got to be at the bus stop at this time, and it's hard. And yeah.
Well, you mentioned the equity portion of it. I think that's interesting to talk about in a panel session that would have had 3 neighborhood organizations, partnership organizations, with big investments. Are there any other partner organizations like this? Why and what can we do and what can be done to further a West Boulevard community partners or something like that gets that neighborhood to see the conversations like these.
So as far as these kinds of partnerships, there's only 3 right now: Center City, University City, and SouthPark. However, there are neighborhood associations across the entire county, and we do engage with the ones in our districts quite frequently, and they're the voice of the community because they are in and of the community. So yes, so where we do not have a Center City partners or a SouthPark partners, these groups can actually have a collective voice that is very impactful, especially when they're dealing with local government.
Yeah, I mean, there are, say, for example, there's Historic West End Partners. There's a West Boulevard Coalition. Those are organizations that, while like from a governance and structure and a tax standpoint are set up differently than we are, serve similar type functions. And there are pros and cons to being set up the way we are. And I think there are some organizations that have said, like, we can have a similar impact and not be bothered by some of the, stuff that we have to deal with. But I think it's important that our organizations, because we do have a seat at the table, we've got to make sure that we're being thoughtful about who's not in the room, who's not in the conversation, who's not at the table, and like individually, as we go to meetings and sit and have conversations, like asking the question who else needs to be at the table, I think is always important for those of us who have the privilege of being in the room, and making sure that our organizations, Center City Partners and Historic West End Partners, have worked together on a number of issues over the last decade, and being able to continue to do those things together is really important.
Yeah. However, the reality is that the funding model is very different.
Yeah.
And you have to take that into account. HWeb does not have, the support or the funding that comes with running a municipal service district. They raise most of their dollars from private foundations, and they invest that into the community. So they're doing a very, very essential task for them without the same backing that we enjoy.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was thinking. It's like the true investment in the neighborhood is not just quarters of opportunity program or something like that. While that is helpful, it's
Right.
There's something different.
Yes.
What other? Go back a little bit. I live in Noda. I see the microtransit going by. The Berry Green drives a lot. What other microtransits?
Skipper. There are a couple of other similar kind of services that operate in Center City, and I don't want to speak for you guys, but CATS has started microtransit in the northern towns. That's been a little bit of a pilot project in the northern part of Mecklenburg County. And they launched, our program launched in November. Theirs probably launched in February-ish. Don't hold me to that, but they're seeing good results. Our trend lines, month over month ridership growth, look really similar in terms of adoption. And they, like us, have seen a really interesting, like if you look at their customer pool, it's almost all new customers. So these are people that were not riding public transportation prior to microtransit. And this new service model has created something that, you know, those new customers found attractive for whatever reason. And we're trading information and notes and sharing best practices with CATS because I think they're learning a lot from their experience in the northern towns. And I think their hope is that that program begins to grow. And, you know, we're trying to figure out what we can learn from theirs and vice versa.
Is it as simple, like if anybody in this room wants to leave here, and then just go get a golf cart and start smaller people around, or do we have to go through CATS, or do we have to go through one of these organizations? What's the rule around it?
I think you can.
Did you guys just do it?
We just did. It wasn't quite that simple, but we just a little bit of the origin story for us. This idea came out of the community engagement we did for the SouthPark vision plan. We heard it almost in every focus group or survey or public engagement we did. People wanted some sort of, you know, neighborhood shuttle service is basically the gist of what we heard. So our team started in the spring of last year, going around the country to look at other places that were doing similar type programs, figuring out, you know, what we wanted to learn from those other places. And there are lots of different operating models. You could do a fixed route, like a circulator, hop on, hop off bus. Do you do something that's more door to door, like our service? So we went, looked at half a dozen other cities to see what other people were doing, came back with a bunch of notes and spent the summer last year building the operating model for our service. Put that together in the late summer and, you know, hired the team that we partner with to be able to do that. It's a third-party company that operates similar services in other places. So we brought their expertise to Charlotte. And we had cars on the road November 15th. So it was a pretty fast process for us, but we said, hey, we want to do this. We talked a lot to our partners at CDOT, and CATS, and other people in the transit space, but ultimately we said we want to pilot this for a year and see what we can learn, and then figure out once it's successful in this 1 square mile, are there opportunities to start scaling beyond the core of SouthPark. And I think that's our hope, is that it becomes part of the mobility network in Charlotte.
Yeah, and I think there was a company, a private company called Rhew.
Yes.
That I believe they folded last year, but they had a similar model. And they were based out of our district, actually, down in South End. It was their main area. Again, you know, it's a tough business climate for sure, especially where private vehicles are so ubiquitous and people depend on that. Having a value proposition that actually makes sense to these people to use that service makes it, you know, I mean, it's tough. So I believe they folded last year, just towards the end of the year, at least from the communication that we got.
We're gonna get to one more question. Questions for the audience. It's a multiple choice question. Scooters. Are they eyesore? Are they health hazard? Are they helpful? Are they all of the above? All of it. Yeah. Okay. All right. Is there parked outside of my house?
Yeah. No, I've seen places where it actually works very well, especially where the people that use it are well educated and informed about how to actually use them, so that they don't just become trash. Okay. You actually need to bring them back to store or stand them up. They're not blocking the sidewalks and such. So, but then I think they're also very useful. You know, if you see how people have adopted them in Center City, it's amazing. You know, they are jumping on and off of these scooters. We have the Center City ambassadors who are constantly cleaning them, or, you know, just putting them in the right place. So I think all of the above items in this case.
Yeah, I was eating lunch with Hugh McCall one time, and he's full of the steers were going by and he goes, look at these things, they're a disease. So,
Yeah.
well, we have some time for questions now. Yes.
I want to follow up on the transportation, and working with businesses.